the society purchased and restored the Cornerstone building, which many of you probably saw as you arrived. What an amazing anchor this has been for the change, the transformation of this neighborhood. My daughter and I were remarking coming here, we used to live in Fernwood years ago, and what a magnificent sense of community there is now in this corner, in this place. So that was some of the work that that the NRG did with Lisa there, strongly pushing and all the times, all the many people that had to be pushed to make it happen. She is thrilled to be working with the community micro lending and is excited about the prospect of changing everything. This is her words. And of course, you know that she was elected to Victoria City Council last November.
Thank you, Denise. My word, by the way, was fun, and I cannot imagine what my life would be like without fun. So, change making. I actually wanted to just speak very briefly about how, and this how to make change is my version. There are many versions, and I'm sure that you could all give an equally compelling speech about how, because I know that you're all doing amazing things in the community. So I just want to talk about 3 hows and tell a few stories. The first how is have ruthless clarity of vision. And my friends say, Lisa, are you sure you want to use the word ruthless? That's pretty well ruthless. And I say, yes, but ruthless modifies clarity. Right? And so this was really important when we started Community Microlending. And for those of you who don't know, Community Microlending is a local nonprofit that makes loans to people right here in Greater Victoria who don't qualify for credit from a bank, but who want to become self-employed or start small businesses. And the important piece of Community Microlending is we don't actually make loans, well, we do, but we facilitate loans. So we identify people who have a small business idea or an idea for self-employment. We work with them to create their business plan, their job plan, whatever it might be. And then we say, hey, neighbors, here's a person that needs a little bit of money. Got any? And we connect people in the community who have money, $500 or more, with people in the community who need to borrow money, right? But that was the idea 2.5 years ago. And all along the way, I heard many ideas. How about we try this, Lisa? Why don't we partner with Vancity? They can make the loans. Why don't we start job training and open a food court in Cook Street Village? Why don't we start a fellowship program? Why don't we? And all of those are fantastic ideas. But had we have run off in any of those directions, the clarity of vision about what we wanted to do, which is move people out of poverty and spur local community economic development at the same time, that vision would not have happened. So it's not to say that people don't come along with great ideas all the time, but it is to say that in order to have ruthless clarity about where you're going and what you want to accomplish, it means saying, unfortunately, and I hate to do this, no many more times than you say yes. And there's a book, it's got a red cover. Anyways, the corporate version is, What's Your Hedgehog Concept? Anyone know that hedgehog concept, the book that I'm talking? Oh, From Good to Great, right. How do you build a great company? You have a hedgehog concept. You figure out what you're really good at, and you do just that, right? The same too with building community and creating change in the community. Figure out what you're really good at. Bring all the people together that you need to be really good at that, and just do that. Don't do anything else. Right? I know it's very hard, and I'm not always good at walking the walk, but I do know that community microlending as it stands today, 2.5 years later, would not have happened as it has, with bringing people who have a little bit of money to lend, people who need a little bit of money to borrow, a mentor to connect it all together, and there we go. So that's the first one, have ruthless clarity of vision. The second one is not unrelated, and it actually ties in nicely with what Dominique said about nonviolent communication. Because really to create change, we need to do, in order to having that ruthless clarity, we also need to work beyond difference, or across difference rather, work across difference, and the next part's even harder, and far beyond our comfort zones, right? How many people do that on a regular basis, work far beyond your comfort zones? Hard work, isn't it? Yeah, that's right. We all need lessons in nonviolent communication for that. And what it takes, I think, to work beyond your comfort zone are two things: courage and strength of voice, and generosity. So when we were starting community microlending, I gathered together a whole bunch of people, very unlike myself, because I knew that that's what it took to form the founding board of directors. Because I know a lot about community, but I did not know a damn thing about making loans, right? So I needed people that did. And one of the people that came to our board at the very beginning, he's definitely in his 70s. He's a retired chief financial officer from a giant trust company in Ontario. And Edwin is his name, and I can tell you that because we're friends now. But it took everything I had. It took all the courage I had, and it took all the generosity I had to come to a common understanding with Edwin, right? And because he knows a lot about making loans to the tunes of millions of dollars, but he had no idea what it meant to make a loan to somebody, for example, who was coming out of prison after 20 years and had no credit score. He had no idea what it meant, for example, to make a loan to somebody, to a woman who was coming out of the women's transition house, right, and had a whole series of dreams shattered and was rebuilding her life now, right? So Edwin and I just went, like there was actual yelling. And I realized, no, it's okay. I realized when Edwin came at me like this, I had to come back with the same velocity and force. Otherwise, he would have pushed, right? And that's where having absolute courage in your vision that you're firmly holding and strength of your own voice. And Edwin stayed on the board for about 2 years, and recently he went back to Ontario. And I have to say, he added a heck of a lot of value, of course, because he knew what he was doing and I didn't. But I knew what I was doing and he didn't. And it was that shared understanding that we came to through having the generosity to understand each other. And Edwin had to go back to Ontario because his wife's son is mentally ill, and so they moved back to Ontario to take care of the son who's in his adult years. And Edwin said to me before he left, he said, "Lisa, you treated me with compassion, and I learned compassion." So through being generous, it's very simple, right? Just be generous, but it's not always that easy. We can find our way together with somebody who appears to be way over here. The third piece of being a change maker, and this is really related to the above too, is be willing to be moved by what you hear. And for me, this is actually ethics. When I was working on my PhD, which I never finished, my PhD turned into community microlending, and I like to say we're doing my PhD all together, all of us. But anyways, when I was working on my PhD, one of my favorite theorists, and I'm sure some of you who are into theory know him, Michel Foucault, and there was a great book published after his death, which is a series of his musings, writing, interviews, and it's called Ethics. And there's one part of the book where he talks about ethics as our practice of being in the world, as our practice of being in the world and reflecting on how we are in the world, and then through reflection, going back and being a little bit different in the world. Pretty simple definition of ethics, how we are and how we are moved by our interactions with each other, by our interactions with Edwin, by our interactions with people that we're working together with. And this is, it sounds so simple, be willing to be moved by what you hear, but it's actually really hard, isn't it? When you come into a meeting, when you come somewhere with your idea and your vision, and somebody else shares a similar vision perhaps, but they've got a little bit of a different way of getting there. And so what do? Do you go strongly with your idea and say, but no, this is how I want to do it. This is how I think we should go. But then you get stuck. I feel stuck when I don't open myself and say, okay, what does it look like from over here? And then I go home and think, wow, I actually watched myself and watched my position and watched my idea of something change just a little bit by what my colleague at the council table said, by what my colleague at the Community Microlending Board table said. One of the fascinating things that I learned when I got to council is that there's this legal principle, it's called open-mindedness. And I'm not joking. We have to, particularly at public hearings, we have to show up with an open mind and be willing to be moved by what we hear when people come. So ruthless clarity of vision, work beyond your comfort zone, and be willing to be moved by what you hear. And thank you to Denise for inviting me to speak.